That was so funny, Lynn. What a great story. I wish we could have shared it with our audience.
Oh my goodness. Just missed it. Oh
Uh,
well. You had to
oh,
be there.
well, yeah, you had to be there. All right, so we are back to our second recap without our fearless leader, Jordan. And the shenanigans continue with Lynn and I. And I'm actually on the road helping my wife out with a cool podcast project herself. So more, stay tuned for that. We'll shout that out when it's ready.
And
Lynn,
you're in
how are you doing?
Baltimore. I'm doing
Yeah, what's
well.
up?
Yeah, I'm in still in Charlottesville, but I'm going to George Washington's Mount Vernon this evening. So a little
That's
traveling myself.
and I'm in Mount Vernon, Baltimore right now. So we're both basically in Mount Vernon.
You can't
Um,
get more dedicated employees than us.
correct. Yeah, exactly.
I only go places called Mount Vernon.
That is it. If it's not Mount Vernon, you will not find me there.
I am not there.
Except for where I live and everywhere else I travel.
Yeah, but you named your
Um,
house Mount Vernon, so
oh, totally. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we all have
yeah,
named our house Mount Vernon,
of course.
and I
Have a little
and I
sign out
rent.
front.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so my next house will be Mount Vernon. It does. It's
Well, you just
easy.
pick up the sign and move it.
Yeah,
That's the beauty of signs.
it clearly demarcates where everything is. If I have a sign, it is
That's what
legit.
it is. It's like having a flag. If you have a flag, you have a country. If you have a
Nailed
sign,
it.
you have a named house.
All right. Well, this is a ridiculous start to this, which is awesome because it was a ridiculous episode in the sense of so much content.
Yes, it was.
Um,
Whew.
the 1.5 parts to our good friend Cassandra Good, Dr. Cassandra Good,
Mm-hmm.
who just released her book First Family. And
Yeah.
we also spoke with her about her first book, Founding Friendships.
Right. Which
And
sort of was part of part of it came from the Founding Friendships, her second book. So all tied
yeah,
together, all
so
relevant.
great, great episode, really awesome. And Cassandra, or Cassie as we know her a little bit
Mm.
less formally, is always great, always fantastic to talk to.
She
Um,
is.
so Lynn, I just wanted to ask you, like, what was something that stuck out with you? Because I definitely have a few things that stuck out. The thing that makes me laugh the most is from the second part, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I was just curious. The first part, founding friendships. Anything that kind of
Well, I think
got you?
the thing that made me laugh was her talking about the naval commander, John Rogers, who we'll just say had a crush on a woman and used his female friend to sort of play in between and wrote to her and said, "Hey, find out if so and so likes me," and sort of, fell back to middle school when you wrote your little notes, find out if so and so likes me. And then you have the note, "Do you like me? Check yes or no."
Right.
So that was kind of that nice. Oh, look, they're still in middle school back then. It's the same kind of, we're all the same in some ways. Um,
Yeah. We never change, right? That's so
right.
cute and
Yeah.
funny, and
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
like I want to say juvenile, but I also would rather call it youthful. Like that's just like such a fun.
Yes.
Everyone's had those butterflies before, right? And you're like,
Exactly.
"Do you
And
like
it's
me?"
not
And
just for
like,
elementary school. It could be any
right.
age.
Yes.
So it was kind of funny imagining a naval commander writing a letter, find out if so and so likes me. And then he goes and, kills a bunch of people and wins the battle. Like, okay. Um,
Yeah. He's tiptoeing around the formalities of communicating with a woman he likes,
right.
but
Right.
simultaneously commands a military
Pretty powerful
operation.
dude.
Yeah.
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 Pretty powerful dude. So I
But
guess in that same vein, it was all of these rules that you had for either the middle class or the upper class. They both had rules in regards to friendships. Friendships between men and women, and also courtship. And what I thought was really neat was how Cassie talked about the fact that the reason they had all these rules was because Americans wanted to prove they were more virtuous than Europeans. So, they'd say, look at those Europeans, those French people out there all having their affairs. And, that's not us. We are virtuous. as Americans. And of course that ties into our, our ever-present topic of what does it mean to be American?
Yeah.
And it was about looking virtuous. Um, and
Presenting
so,
virtuous,
right.
not,
So one
yeah,
thing she
yeah.
said, and this was for not necessarily the elite classes, but for more the middle classes, that 1 in 3 women were already pregnant when they got married. But as long as they got married, they were okay, because it was
Right.
about, who's going to take care of this child. And if they got married, well, the father will. So it was like economic, but it was also virtuous. Okay, you got married, you're okay. Um,
That brings up such a good point. And like when she brought up like the, I thought it was so interesting because she mentions also when she says that like the community was worried about the burden
mm-hmm.
of or the cost of the child on the community, and it's like
Right.
you must have a man, with an
Right.
estate
Yes.
or something to take care of this child, and it's like that's, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but like that's not particularly virtuous in my mind as a community, right? Like I guess virtue if we're exclusively keeping it to like a woman being married, but
Mm-hmm.
like as a community, that's not productive. I don't know. That just seems kind of
Right.
counter,
You're thinking that,
like paradoxical, right?
right,
Like
because
take
you're thinking virtue would be to take care of people who cannot take care of themselves. That would be
correct.
your virtue. And they're saying being a single mother who's, whose lover wouldn't marry her, well, that's embarrassing. And we don't want
Yeah, and who's a
Europeans
part of
to.
our community doesn't deserve the resources of the community.
Right. Yeah. So that is interesting that, which one you have to almost be, what's the opposite? Invirtuous.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Economically, to be virtuous,
Yeah,
when it
and
comes to marriage.
right. And there was a distinction in that like the virtuous or the most virtuous presenting was definitely those in higher society, right? Like if you had
Right.
less money, it was a little different. And I think most of our history follows the stories of those who had a lot of money, a lot of power, typically,
Of
right?
course.
Um, and I'm sure there's a lot more history and a lot of really cool stuff about those who were not in those positions of power.
Mhm.
So just pay attention, keep an eye out for that. It's not always as sexy, but it does exist. So
Absolutely.
I wanted to talk about another point,
Mhm.
which I thought was fascinating, was Abigail Adams and how there's a moment where Cassie actually says people were upset with John Adams and said he wouldn't have made that decision if she were there. And so there was and sorry for the full context, she was away at the time, and they
Mhm.
worked very closely during his presidency, and she was, you know, a friend and even political advisor. And correct me if I'm wrong, Lynn, to
Absolutely.
multiple politicians, George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and then what was their son's name? Forgive me. The fourth president,
Oh, John Quincy.
John Quincy
John
Adams,
Quincy
right?
Adams.
So
So John.
yeah.
John
So
and
John
John.
Adams, right, right. Just wanted to make sure I didn't get that wrong. But so it's not like she wasn't friends with the first 4 presidents of the United States. It's not like she didn't have political sway. But I thought that was so interesting that their dynamic and their relationship was so tied together, right?
Mhm.
Um, and when we think about a lot of relationships in the time, it is not. I think my reality with George and Martha has changed as we've worked on our docu series, right? But
Right.
but I'm not. I couldn't tell you Thomas Jefferson. I couldn't tell you Ben Franklin. I couldn't tell you a lot of other presidents' wives that I know are tied
Right.
into the political fold. And so it was really interesting to hear that, and also to know that they also valued her decision making so much
Mhm.
that they literally were upset that he made a decision on his own that
Without
was
her.
without her. Right.
Which is
I thought that
really,
was really
really
cool.
interesting. No, that's super cool, because from my research of George and Martha Washington, I almost feel like it may have been more prolific for these women to be knowledgeable and to be sort of the sounding piece, and the friend of their husband, but it just wasn't known. So most people
Mhm.
don't know how much Martha Washington really knew was going on during both the Revolutionary War and the presidency. But the general public didn't seem to acknowledge that the way right there someone was acknowledging, hey, he needs Abigail Adams to make a good decision,
Right.
which was really nice because it was actually acknowledged in public that she was a woman, but she was still very knowledgeable and perhaps at some points probably more trusted than John Adams since he did have a likability problem.
Crazy stuff. So that is yes, and go check out the episode, part
Yes.
1 of the episode, to learn all about that. The links to it's at 2c4hpod.com, and we have other links to all of our stuff, and you can get a link to her book, and check that out. And so now we're going to switch gears really quickly to part 2, which is First Family, which is the book that Cassie's been working on for the better part of a decade, if not more than a decade.
Just came out.
Just came out. June 6th, I believe, was the release. So it's been 9 days. Go check it out. Great book. All about George Washington's stepchildren and how we don't really know a lot about them now, but some fantastic stories and just so interesting. And one of the things, Lynn, I was cracking up was that is it Bushrod or Wash, or are they the same person? I get so confused.
They are not the same person.
Okay.
Bushrod
Forgive me.
Bushrod is a nephew, and Washi is the step-grandson. So Jackie's son. Okay. George Washington Parke Custis, and we'll just call him Wash.
Wash. Okay. And he was the artist. Yes. Correct?
Wash was.
Yes. So he was
using that term
painter,
loosely, according to
loosely. And I just thought it was so funny that he paints for, I believe, the better part of a decade, if not more. And they don't get better. There's no evolution of artistry. He just keeps putting out paintings that are really bad. And
he gets
one actually gets, yeah, I know. So you feel bad for him. But also he had a lot of really, not complicated, but bad beliefs. He wasn't the best when it came to some of the other artistry that he did. You'll have to check out the episode to find out what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was so funny that going back to, like, we don't really hear stories about more regular people, especially in like lower classes.
Right.
And now here's this high class, high society person who's just not particularly good at anything.
But he doesn't need to be, because he's a Custis and he can tie back to George Washington.
So his art gets put out there and it gets made fun of so badly that he ends up having it taken down and burned or something like that.
Throw it in the river. No one wants it. Yeah.
That story made me laugh heartily. I thought it was very funny.
I think there are a lot of really good stories with the Custises.
Yeah.
I think one of the big picture things that I really liked about the second part and about her book is the definition of family. And I think one thing we can all relate to today is that the Custises were using the Washington legacy, claiming the Washington legacy to try to further themselves. So at the time, Cassie explained that the legal definition of family is blood descent through marriage. So technically, at the time, Custis, they were not related to George Washington. In fact, she says that several times he had said, "I have no family," which means he had no blood relation children. So the Custises are sort of pushing against that because it is absolutely to their benefit to not only mold George Washington's legacy, but then to sort of cling on to it. And I mean, one of the reasons that Bushrod Washington likely becomes the head of the American Colonization Society is because his last name was Washington. I mean, at least he had the name, but the Custises, they had to, go through it in different ways. And, maybe they didn't make fun of his paintings as much because his last name, his last name's Washington. So, you got that guilt. Well, I'm kind of making fun of George Washington. So, better pretend like this isn't ugly and put it in the back room.
Right. Can't make fun of the founding father or a descendant of the founding. Yeah. My goodness gracious. The George Washington or any of his.
It's just like celebrities today. Like they
Yeah.
always try to tie people. Like, oh, so and so is the second cousin of the uncle of the father of, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're like, are they really related? But you want
Does
to
it
kind of pull
matter?
that out. Exactly.
Yeah.
Why does it matter?
Uh, uh,
But even back
does
then they thought.
greatness, right? But does greatness shed off and like permeate throughout families, or is it really, a
That's a good
philosophical
question.
question for later?
Absolutely. Very good
Um,
question. We can think about Jackie and Wash too and their general intellectual or lack thereof pursuits.
yeah. And was that now is that nature versus nurture, or
Right. How much is nature and how much is nurture?
hmm, we'll
hmm
never
No,
know.
I mean, George Washington
We'll never
tried
know.
to get Jackie to be a better student. I
He
think
did.
we'd agree he probably failed.
Yep.
And then the grandkid,
Yeah.
George
Which
Washington was
you'll
there
learn
to raise
all
Wash,
about,
and
right?
Mhm.
And you'll learn all about that in First Family
That's right.
by Cassandra A. Good, Dr. Cassandra A. Good. Please, I don't
hmm
want to not do that.
And it
And
may one day be
awesome.
a soap opera. So, it may be the next big thing, the next
That
Bridgerton or
I would
Downton
love that
Abbey,
so much.
right?
Yeah, like just that'd be so
You
wild.
heard it first here, so go read the book.
Yeah, go read the book and then let's start a petition and we'll make the
Yes,
show.
exactly. Start a GoFundMe
Yeah,
for the soap opera of the Custis's.
the Custis soap opera.
Yes.
Love it. All right, Lynn. Well, thank you. Again, I'm on the road, so sorry if there's any weirdness with my audio, but otherwise, as always, so great to talk to you.
So
Really
much fun.
enjoyed. Yeah.
Such a great episode.
So
Two
go
in
check it
one.
out. 2-in-1, a twofer, the
Yes.
old twofer. 2c4hpod.com. It's wherever you get your podcasts. We're up on YouTube. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Lynn.
See you next time. Thanks, Pat.